Swedish, an introductory overview. This is a text of Swedish. It's an excerpt from a classic novel called The Immigrants by Vilhelm Moberg. And with Swedish, we're looking at our sixth living Scandinavian language. We started looking at Icelandic, and then we saw Faroese, and then we saw Norwegian Nynorsk, and Norwegian Bokmål, and last week we saw Danish. And with these last three languages in particular, we saw that we were really dealing with truly variations on a theme. They use the exact same character set. They are pretty much the same language. And in order to tell them apart, we needed to find little words that we could scan for on a page and make that distinction. And I will say that I'm somebody, I really need that. Sometimes I will be in a library or a bookstore, and I will see a title that catches my interest. And I'll take the book down, and I'll start to read it for content, and then all of a sudden it will occur to me, wait a minute, I thought this was Danish. Perhaps it's really Norwegian. I need to do a check because I've got the wrong voice perhaps buzzing in my head. I don't know if Danes and Norwegians actually have that problem, but Swedish, although it's so similar as to be mutually intelligible, I think is, relatively speaking, quite distinctive. It has a different look and feel about it. In Swedish, we lose these several characters. It's the same set of sounds, but a slightly different character set. We lose the combination A and E and the O with a slash through it, and these are replaced respectively with the A with an umlaut over it and the O with an umlaut over it. And so that's the first thing I think you would feel when you look at a Swedish page. There's little dots all over the page. Lots of letters have two dots over them, whereas we don't get that in Danish or Norwegian. Beyond that, just the feel of the letters. A and E are both front vowels, and the proportion of them is totally different in Swedish from Norwegian and Danish. Counting A's and E's is not a lot of fun, but it's just sort of an instinctive feel that I had that I wanted to check. And yes, in the first three lines of this text, we have 21 A variants versus only 12 E's, whereas in this text, the Danish, we have 6 A's versus 22 E's, and in the Norwegian text, we have 8 A's versus 23 E's. So in Swedish, we have twice as many A's as E's on a given text, whereas in the other languages, we have 3 or 4 times as many E's as A's. So that's just an instinctive feel that you can act upon to know what language you're looking at. In Swedish, these are not actually A variants at all. These are different letters that come at the end of the alphabet, so you need to look for them in a different place in a dictionary, but for an untrained eye, they certainly look like A's. So if that's all not enough to just know that you're looking at Swedish, if we want to have one word that we can scan a page for, the word for and in Swedish is, here it is, it's OCH versus OG in all the other languages. They're pronounced pretty much the same, usually reduced to O, but there. That's what Swedish kind of looks like. And now, what does it sound like? As always, I can only give you a rough imitation. I do my best to mime what it sounds like. Perhaps I mangle it to the point when I make a mockery. I hope it's not so bad. To the best of my abilities, this text sounds something like this. Karl-Oskar hade tagit plats på framsätet bredvid skyddskarlen med Johan i knät. Kristine satt på baksätet med de båda minsta barnen, som trots den tidiga timmen var fullvakna och klarögda. Och på hästens hösäck längst där bak hade Robert satt sig. Ute på vägen vände sig Karl-Oskar om en sista gång och tittade ut stugan. På Falsterbron stod hans far och mor kvar och såg efter den bortfarande. Fadern framåtlutad och krukryggig, stöd på sina kryckor. Modern tätt in vid hans sida, högväxt och rak i ryggen. Här satt de unga som drog bort. Där stod den gamla som lämnades kvar. Karl-Oskar had taken plats, his place, a place, på, on, framsätet, the front seat, bredvid, next to, skyddskarlen, the driver guy, the driver, med, with, Johan, in, knät, the knee, on his knees. So Karl-Oskar had taken his place on the front seat next to the driver with Johan on his knees. Kristina sat på on baksätet, the back seat, med, with, dem, the båda, both, minsta, youngest, barnen, the children, som, whom, trots, in spite of, den, the, tidiga, early, timmen, hour, var, were, fullvakna, wide awake, och, and, klarögde, bright-eyed, och, and, på, on, hästarnas, the horses, hösak, haysack, längst, longest, there, back, in the back, had, Robert, sat, say himself. So Christina sat on the back seat with the two younger children, who, in spite of the early hour, were wide awake and clear-eyed. And on the way back, in the back, Robert had sat himself down on the horse's haystack. Ute, out, på, on, vägen, the way, vände, turned, sig, himself, Karl Oskar, around, in, a, sista, last, gång, time, och, and, tittade, looked, åt, at, stugan, the cabin, the house, på, on, fastubron, the porch, stood, hans, his, father, och, and, mother, kvar, behind, remaining, och, and, såg, looked, after, dom, the, bortfarande, away, driving, those going away, fadern, the father, framåtlutad, forward, bent, so bent over, och, and, krokryggig, crooked-backed, stood up, supported, på, by, sina, his, kryckor, his crutches, modern, the mother, tät, directly, invid, next to, hans, his, sida, side, högväxt, high-grown, tall, och, and, rak, straight, in, ryggen, the back. So, out on the road, Karl Oskar turned himself around and looked one last time at the home. On the porch stood his mother and father. His mother and father stood behind and were looking after those who were driving away. The father was bent forward and hunched over and supported on his crutches, and the mother was standing right next to him and was tall and straight in her back. Here, sat, dom, the, unga, young ones, som, whom, drog, bort, drove away, were going away. There, stood, dom, the, gamla, old ones, som, whom, lämnades, were being left, passive, were being left, kvar, behind. Here sat the young ones who were driving away, and there stood the old ones who were being left behind. There's how Swedish works, and I think you can see when I do a translation of this kind of thing how close it is to English and German, all the Germanic languages, but obviously the closest ones, if this is true, are the ones we've just looked at, Danish and Norwegian. These languages are often the paradigmatic example of mutually intelligible languages. They're held up to be that, but to what degree are they really? Now, you've seen them all. You can make your own choice. Certainly Norwegians and Danes can generally make each other out, and southern Swedes, people from Lund, can certainly understand Danish quite well, so they can just each stand and talk in their own form. But I myself, I've been to northern Sweden, and there was a Danish girl. We were in the town of Jokkmokk, north of the polar circle, and she certainly could not communicate with the people there, and economics don't lie. You can find books translated from one language into the other. It's a question, I think, of wanting to understand and being exposed, but we, non-Scandinavians, as foreigners, can learn any one of them and really get 3 for the price of 1. So I'm seeing the red blinking. I'm going to be cut off.